falsely claiming his supporters are being disenfranchised, that he's the victim of fraud, and calling for an end to the counting in states where he's ahead. Even threatening to take his challenge to the Supreme Court. With millions of ballots still to be counted, Biden calls for calm and patience.
We believe we're on track to win this election, and it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted.
Now all eyes on those key swing states. A big victory for the president in Florida and Ohio. Biden pulling ahead in Arizona. Wisconsin, Georgia, and Michigan still up for grabs. Plus, the nail-biter in the critical state of Pennsylvania that could decide the election. We're breaking down all the battlegrounds still in play and still counting this morning.
As many as 160 million Americans casting their vote. With the most divisive election of our generation on the line, our powerhouse political team is spread out all across the country, breaking down the final sprint to 270 electoral votes. The fight to the finish is not over on this history-making morning.
Live in Times Square, this is a special edition of Good Morning America. Your voice, your vote. Election 2020.
Well, there's got to be a morning after, and George, you have been up all night covering this deal, Ivan.
This is 2020, which means we're watching something we have never seen before. Presidential election with several states too close to call, millions of ballots left to be counted. So here's where the race stands right now. President Trump has racked up 213 electoral votes. Joe Biden has 225 electoral votes so far. The question, of course, is who can get to 270, the number needed to win. 23 states have been declared for the president, 19 for Biden. But you see those gray states up there on the map. So many key battlegrounds still outstanding. Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Pennsylvania.
And that's a live look at the votes still being counted in Philadelphia. Millions of votes still being counted across the country, George.
Let's take a look at the White House right now. That's where President Trump came out around 2 a.m. declaring basically that he had won the election, that he was the victim of fraud, that his voters were being disenfranchised, even threatening to go to the Supreme Court to stop the count, even though millions of ballots are outstanding. It was a false claim and an empty threat. The president is behind right now in the Electoral College and the popular vote. He can't go to the Supreme Court to stop the counting. There's days of countings ahead. Mary Bruce is with the Biden campaign in Delaware. She starts us off. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, this unprecedented campaign culminated in a very unprecedented night, and this is not over yet. This morning, this race is still very much up in the air, but that has not stopped President Trump from coming out and prematurely and baselessly declaring victory, threatening that legal action, while Biden's team this morning is promising to fight and guarantee that every vote is counted. This morning, the White House hanging in the balance with the race in several key battleground states still too close to call. But even though millions of votes still need to be counted, President Trump falsely claiming he won and telling the country he'll call on the Supreme Court to end the election. Experts say that would be an illegitimate move.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay?
The president has no power to stop legitimately cast votes from being counted, and there have been no signs of any foul play. The Biden campaign calling the president's remarks a naked effort to take away the democratic rights of American citizens. Trump did have a better night than expected, outperforming the polls once again and pulling in new voters. He's now projected to pick up Ohio, Texas, and Florida, critical wins keeping his re-election hopes alive. But he's still far from the finish line. And Joe Biden also has a clear path to victory, holding on to blue states Trump tried to flip, like Minnesota, and with a substantial lead in Arizona, a state that went red in 2016. Speaking to supporters after midnight at a drive-in rally in Delaware, Biden urging patience and projecting confidence without declaring victory.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. It ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted.
Because of the surge in mail-in voting due to the pandemic, we've known for months that in many states it could take days to tally all of the ballots. O'Malley Dillon, statement. And George, this morning, all eyes are now on that blue wall that Trump toppled in 2016, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So right now, here's where things stand. Trump is ahead in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Biden has a very narrow lead in Wisconsin, but there's still a lot of uncounted votes out there that could tip these races in either candidate's favor. And George, right now, Georgia and North Carolina, those races still too close to call.
Yeah, we've seen that starting to happen overnight in the Midwest. We saw Donald Trump go out to big leads in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Overnight, they've closed in Wisconsin. I said Biden's ahead, and it's closed in Michigan as well. We're still waiting for counts in Pennsylvania. So how is the Biden camp absorbing all of this? What's their move right now?
Well, this is obviously not the way they wanted this night to go, but they are adamant and confident that ultimately this will end in their favor. They like what they are seeing in Arizona. They see encouraging signs, of course, out of Wisconsin that they are pointing to. So, George, they are confident, but they are also furious, calling the president's comments last night outrageous. They say they have a, quote, legal team standing by ready to deploy to resist his efforts to try and fight this. They insist those teams will prevail and are urging people to be patient. They say your vote will be counted, George.
It could take days. Okay, Mary Bruce, thanks very much, Robin.
And George, as we just saw the president speaking at the White House just hours ago, just after 2 a.m. Eastern time. And now for more on the mood inside the Trump camp, let's go to our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega. Good morning, Cecilia.
Hi, Robin. Good morning to you. So let's break this down in terms of where the vote count is right now. It's a mixed bag in terms of the reaction coming in. There are some sources who are privately conceding the map isn't exactly where they wanted it to be this morning. There are others who say they're happy with what they're seeing, though they do acknowledge there is a lot of vote counting that still needs to be done. In terms of that stunning speech that we saw at 2 o'clock this morning from President Trump, look, I got to tell you, I can't say it was a surprise. We saw this coming. The president has been ramping up these conspiracy theories about the vote being stolen from him in the weeks leading up to Election Day. He'd been talking more and more about it. Sources are telling us behind the scenes to those in his inner circle. And here we go. The strategy from the president right now is crystal clear. He is going to be spreading conspiracy theories and falsehoods, likely for the days to come as we count these, see these vote counts come in. We know his lawyers have been preparing for possible legal action. At this point, there is still talk of the possibility of that, though we don't know exactly what that would look like, since again the counting is still underway. But these wild claims of fraud that the president is spreading, Robin, that stunned even people close to him. It caught many by surprise. They feel like this is a message that is being bungled. One source telling our team that this is the worst case scenario in terms of the president could have delivered the message that he could have delivered last night, Michael.
All right, thank you, Cecilia. And as we said, the president, he is calling for an end to the counting in states where he's ahead, threatening to take his challenge all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. Dan?
Good morning, Michael. You know, the Supreme Court has a lot of power, even in voting cases. For example, in Bush v. Gore, we saw that the Supreme Court stepped in and stopped the recount. The Supreme Court could decide that particular types of ballots are invalid. But what the Supreme Court can't do and won't do is literally stop the counting. We're still in the process of evaluating round one of the counting. Yes, there very likely will be some recounts in some of these states, and I don't even expect the Supreme Court to stop those original recounts. Down the road, might the Supreme Court get involved? It's possible, but they're certainly not going to stop these votes from being counted. George?
No question about that, Dan. Your job is just getting started on this election. You're going to be busy in the days ahead following these legal battles. But right now, let's go to Tom Yamas at the big board. And Tom, let's take a look at what we have coming in right now and give a sense of each candidate's best path to 270 electoral votes they need. Let's start out by saying that Joe Biden will actually take those states where he's narrowly ahead right now, Arizona and Nevada and Wisconsin. Show what has to happen for him then to win.
All right, I also want to give our viewers a heads up. We've given Alaska to President Trump and Maine to Joe Biden for the purposes of the segment because we haven't projected those just yet. But as you were saying, if we give Arizona and Nevada to Joe Biden and Wisconsin, where he has a lead in all three of those states at this hour, he's at 254. All he has to do is win Michigan. You can see what happens. He goes to 270. What about Pennsylvania? Same story, 274. If he wins Georgia, it's the same thing, George, 270.
So if we have that same assumption that Arizona and Nevada and Wisconsin go to Biden, where he's leading in all three states right now, Donald Trump, the president will have to win in all 4 states where he's ahead right now.
It gets a little tougher. Let's look at the math. So you see Donald Trump's votes right up there. If he wins Pennsylvania, he goes to 236. He'll have to win Michigan as well, 252. He'll also have to win North Carolina at 267. He has to win somewhere else. He may have to come here to Nevada. It's very tight right now. It's gotten tighter since we've come on the air. It gets very hard for the president in this scenario, but there's still, like you stressed, the entire broadcast, a lot of the votes still out.
Sure, our time, Giannis. Thanks very much, Robin.
Yeah, and as Tom just illustrated, what happens in the battleground states, specifically Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, could determine this election. Eva Pilgrim is in Philadelphia with the state of the race there. Good morning, Eva.
Good morning, Robin. Pennsylvania is still very much in the air this morning, and while Donald Trump may appear ahead, there are still a lot of votes that need to be counted in this state. Specifically, a large chunk of votes in Philadelphia and Allegheny counties. Both are expected to go big for Biden. In Bucks County, a suburb of Philadelphia, we are just starting to see the returns on those early ballots. Biden is expected to get a large portion of those votes, and that's the thing you have to keep in mind. Each county has their own plan. Several are just starting to count those mail-in ballots this morning. There are about 2.5 million of them statewide. Only about 46% of them have been counted at this time. And we've been told by the Secretary of State's office that they are hopeful that a majority of those mail-in ballots will be counted by Friday, but it is going to take time. People are going to have to be patient for these returns. Michael?
Definitely patience, Eva. Thank you so much. And now to Wisconsin, where election workers have been counting ballots all day and all night. Deborah Roberts is in Kenosha with the latest on the race there. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning, Michael. And Wisconsin is certainly living up to its reputation as a battleground state. This morning, still no clear winner in this race, with President Trump and Joe Biden duking it out and quite possibly heading for a battle in court over these 11 electoral votes here. Now, the big issue is that avalanche of absentee and mail-in ballots. So many of them, almost 2 million of them actually, that workers had to count. Now, the problem was this state is in the middle of a ravaging coronavirus epidemic, a 44% spike in cases, so a lot of people just did not feel comfortable coming out to the polls to vote, and it made for a hairy day for election officials. I have to say, though, they took great care to handle the ballots carefully. In Kenosha, election workers raced against the clock, processing mounds of paperwork. They weren't even allowed to begin counting until 7 a.m. on Election Day. Now, by nightfall, this race was tight, with President Trump holding a very slight lead in this state that he claimed 4 years ago. In Milwaukee, the state's largest city, the votes were tallied and finally brought in about 3:30 a.m. and then driven by police escort to the few blocks where they would actually tally those votes, giving now Vice President Biden a very slight lead, a virtual tie here, but very slight. This morning, Michael, most of those votes are in, with the exception of Kenosha, so we may find out this morning exactly where Wisconsin falls and who wins this state. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed for a lot of people.
A lot of people just want to know. They just want to know. But a good shout out to the poll workers. They are volunteers and they are working as hard as they can. Now to Arizona, where Biden, as we say, is holding the lead, a state that went red in 2016. Whit Johnson is in Phoenix with more on that side of the story. Good morning, Whit.
Robin, good morning to you. Democrats are feeling very confident here, where, as you mentioned, in Arizona, Biden is still holding on to that slight lead. Now, I can tell you that the Republicans, on the other hand, are trying to make sure that every vote is counted here, because it could still be close. We knew that Biden was going to do well in those early votes that came in, and that Donald Trump was going to do well in the votes on Election Day. So the Republicans are urging caution to make sure that every vote is counted. But if Biden were to win, it would be the first time that a Democrat could turn this traditionally red state blue in a presidential election since 1996. But as I mentioned, there are still those votes to be counted, specifically right here in Maricopa County, and they could total several 100,000 And these are absentee ballots that people actually brought to the polls on Election Day or in the couple days leading up to Election Day. I also want to make sure we mention that Senate race as well to fill the seat of the late Senator John McCain. The Democrat Mark Kelly still holding that lead over the Republican Martha McSally. George?
Okay, Whip, thanks very much. Let's bring in Rahm Emanuel and Chris Christie for more on this right now. And Rahm, let me begin with you. So far, we still haven't projected Arizona. So far, both sides have just held the states they held back in 2016. It's like a rerun so far of 2016. I know you've been in touch with the Biden campaign overnight. Where are they confident in those remaining states? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia.
Well, they're confident Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin. And then here's how I think is the best way to frame it so people understand the perspective. You have one election result, but two elections, meaning you have a same-day vote election. The results skew all across the country towards Trump, and then you have the absentee and the mail-in ballots, and they skew for Joe Biden. As you look at Wisconsin, when those votes started to count, Joe Biden moved ahead. So you almost have two separate elections, and depending on where you are in each state, which votes you're counting, like in Pennsylvania, they believe that if you look at the numbers, as the absentee and the mail-in ballots come in, Joe Biden's winning those 80%. There's 1.5 million out there. That's enough to overcome the 600,000 vote shortage. That's exactly how you have to count it in all the states differently.
Chris Christie, in the hours around midnight, the White House, at least White House aides and campaign aides, were relatively confident about how the president could do in Pennsylvania and Michigan and some of the other states that were still out there like Georgia and North Carolina. Yet the president still came out there around 2 a.m. and called for stopping the count. Should we expect he's going to follow through on that, or was that just rhetoric?
Listen, George, you can't tell at this point. I think it depends on how everything shakes out with these vote counts, right? So I think they still believe they have a chance in Arizona. I still think they believe they have a chance in Nevada. They're winning in Georgia. They're winning in North Carolina. They're winning in Pennsylvania. They're winning in Michigan right now. So if you're the White House, my view would be, let's get the votes counted and see where all this lands. Because right now, based upon the states where you're winning, you'll win the election if you can maintain those leads. Now, what Rahm said is right too. Depending upon where you're counting those votes from is how it may go. But right now, if you're the president, you're winning in those states. My view would be, let's get the votes counted, and if I can maintain those leads, I'm reelected.
Rahm Emanuel, one of the stories of this election is that both sides got their vote out. We're going to have record turnout, but a very, very close election.
And both sides got their vote turnout. I think when you look at it, the one takeaway, George, the polling was wrong. It was wrong again, even worse than it was in 2016. I do think, though, the campaign, on the Biden campaign, ran a great field operation as it related to chasing the mail, getting absentee votes. You got to give it to Trump right now. He turned out a vote that nobody saw in any baseline was there, that there was more Trump voters that did not vote in 2016, and he, I think by sheer force of will, made him show up, and you can see that by the tightness of this race. It was not projected in the polls.
Okay, we're going to stay on this all morning long. Right now, so many eyes on the left.
Polling was awful.
The polling does seem to have been missed. There's no question about that. We're watching Pennsylvania right now. We're going to be talking to the Attorney General of that critical state. He's going to join us live coming up.
Also, the latest on the technical glitches and where the race stands in the key battleground state of Georgia. Their Secretary of State is also going to join us live. But first, let's check in with Ginger. Good morning, Ginger.
And let's get those sunny cities, sponsored by Prudential.